Okay, welcome everybody to the City of Cross Lake Budgeting Workshop for the 2021 preliminary tax levy. Mike, I turn it over to you.
All right, thank you, Mayor. On the screen, you can see the agenda for this afternoon. Just to remind everybody, we've got about an hour, maybe a little less, so I'm going to try to close things off at about 1:45 so we can get ready for the next meeting. So let's try to stick to that agenda. There's really three things we need to talk about today when we look at the Pay 21 levy and budget. This is our first meeting on the budget. Remember last year, I think we met about just a few days sooner, so we're basically on the same schedule we were last year. I'd first like to start, before we get into the packet, I'd like to get the council's take on what their goals and expectations are for the budget. Keeping in mind we have a whole lot of big things in there that are, we need to figure out how we're going to do it. So I'd like just to let everybody know this is very preliminary and it will change. There's a long ways to go to get this done. So I guess I'd like to start with the council and say, as far as levy and spending, and what would you like to see in the budget? Some of you have shared your comments with me, but let's go through that.
Are you talking specific projects?
We'll get to that in a minute, but what we're looking at is what would you like to see with the levy? What would you like to see with debt financing versus cash? Things like that. Just 30,000 foot view right now. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I'd like to see the levy go down for a change. If that's any kind of goal.
Aaron?
I think I'm interested in hearing about the roads, where we're going to go with that, because I think that's a significant expenditure, or potentially is, and I think I'd like to hear more on that end of it.
John?
I'd like to keep the levy increase, which I think might have to happen as small as possible. I'd like us to do those things that only we need to do. I have some concerns that we're putting off some of the road stuff, and it's going to be a big hit later, but I can understand doing that for a year or two if we need to because of other things. But I think we need to keep the levy as close to last year's as possible. I doubt we can drop it, but if we could, that's cool. I also think that due to the cost of money right now, which is very cheap, that I'd rather keep as much cash as we can and bond for whatever is necessary because the rates are so low. And in the big scheme of things, if we talk about doing stuff like this building or whatever, the people that will be paying for this building will be the people that will get the advantage of it, will be using it. So if we've got buildings like this one that are going to last a bunch of years, I can understand that there's be some advantage in spreading out the cost of that.
Okay. Well, with that said, let's just switch files here and look at some of the budget assumptions. I'll try.
Dave Schrupp.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dave.
Thanks, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I see 5% on there. I'd like to see some sort of a limit placed on it. I'm hoping that we can do it for less than 5. I don't know that it's needed that we decrease it. I think inflationary factors come into play here. The one thing I want to do is understand the roads. One of the things we did at Public Works was question why we were doing certain things, and then at some point we have to believe our engineers and the Public Works people. So, and we did make a commitment a few years ago to keep up with the roads so that they don't, we don't push them down the road and then we have a big problem moving ahead. But yeah, let's walk through it, and then I did send my questions into you, and you can address them if necessary as we go along. Thanks.
Yeah, I've got your questions. And I've got responses to each one of them too. So if you open up your budget packet, it's about the 39 page item on the inside cover, there's a table of contents. And we're not going to go through every line item by object code in this. We're going to try to get some high-level direction on which direction the group wants to go and some marching orders so we can have a good meeting at our next budget meeting. So with that, let's go to some budget assumptions. What we need to do right now is understand that our goal is to get the preliminary levy certified by the end of September, no later than September 30th. I believe that's a Wednesday. So we've got some time to do that. And the idea here is to set the levy at such a level that you can come down from it, because that's the highest your levy can be at that meeting. When you set the preliminary levy, you can go down, but you can't go back up if something else pops up. Now, we do need to set it at something by the end of September. If we don't, then the county will roll over your last year's levy as your number. The other thing I'd like to set at this meeting right now is when we do our final levy certification, we need to have an open meeting with the public where the public can come and contact and challenge our levy. So right now I'm proposing our truth and taxation meeting and final levy certification. We can either do it during the regular meeting on December 14th, or we can have a special meeting before or after that, whichever your pleasure is. If you'd like to do that, we can set that meeting right now.
We don't have to set it right now, though.
Do you want it set now?
Yeah, I'd like to set it right now so everybody knows when we're going to have that final meeting, and we can work backwards from there.
And when is the last date of the final meeting? I mean, when does it have to be done by?
December 31st.
Okay.
But if you look at all the calendar files, December 14th is our regular council meeting. You start running out of time after that to do that. Now, you can set it now. I'm not sure if you can change it later, but
If we need it in a special meeting, I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I kind of am too. It might, I don't know how long it'll take.
John and Dave?
I just think you ought to try to get it done by December 14 or around there, because once you start getting past that, you're into holidays, travel, whatever.
Or we can do it earlier on the 14th, 5 o'clock.
That's also
or
true.
6 o'clock.
I'm easy. Just
What about Dave? Oh, I'm sorry. What about Dave? Truck.
Yeah, I'm looking at the calendar right now, trying to pick a date. We should set a date. You want to try December 7th? Is that going to pinch the staff?
How long do you think it'll take, Mike?
the budget meeting,
Yeah, the final, just.
the final, in the 5 or 7 years I've been here, I've only had 3 questions at a meeting, and they were on, at the final meeting, it was on why did my value change on my property? So I mean, usually they don't, by the time we get to that point, you know, it's just, okay, we're there, we've answered all the questions, and it's time to move on.
I kind of move that we do it on December 14th at 6 o'clock before the regular meeting.
Okay?
Dave's okay with that.
At what time?
14th at 6 o'clock.
Is that a motion, Dave? Shrub?
Yeah, I
And
guess.
a second, Dave Shrub?
Yes?
Yes, if you're looking at me. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear my name. Okay.
Okay, oh, I'm sorry, we got a motion and a second, yeah. Any other conversation? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Aye.
I was trying to figure out how to do it in my calendar.
That's gonna take you a while.
I got it in.
Okay, so I'm moving on to page 3, it looks like, page 1 in the budget package. So when we talk about revenue assumptions, you know, I think we all understand we have some levy challenges, because for Cross Lake, That's where our money comes from to run the city, is from our levy, for all practical purposes. We have some charges for services, user fees, things like that, but we get minimal state aid. We get some state aid that we pass through to like the fire department and things like that, but for all practical purposes, our money comes from tax levy. So whenever we change our levy, it's very sensitive to the taxpayer. And remember, for us, our levy, our taxes, for a taxpayer, the taxes get paid to three places, primarily the county, the school district, and the city. But since my name winds up in everybody's tax statement, if there's any change in any of the levies, I'm usually the one that gets the phone call. So changes from this year, from last year, remember last year we did not have a levy for the EDA. We put a placeholder in there for $10,000 to cover the Bladec contract and some of the things the EDA does throughout the year. They had a cash balance in there, which they spent down a little bit. Now they're to the point where they'll need some help. There's a couple ways you can do that. You can budget the EDA as a levy item, or you can budget it as a transfer item from the general fund. But the point is the money's going to come from levy to fund their operations. It's been a while since we've had a sewer rate adjustment. Right now, this model does not show an adjustment to the sewer. Right now, it's $50 a month. Our last increase was probably starting in 2019, and that was from $48 to $50. When we look at the revenues for the utility fund, we try to set it so we break even on operations. The rate structure does not cover debt service, nor does it cover capital purchases or depreciation.
How far behind, how much in debt do we get every year with sewer right now on those two items?
Well, depreciation is running about $315,000 a year, so we're not covering any of that. Debt service is about $225,000, so we're not providing funds for either one of those. On the operations, we're usually coming within about $50,000, depending on timing of repairs and maintenance items.
I guess I'm thinking that we should increase it a little bit to try to cover operations at least, if we could.
Okay. We can take another look at that and come back through Ted and his commission on a proposed rate then.
I'd like to see a little history of the rate increases that have happened at the sewer.
Sure, we can provide that too. Okay.
Seemed like it was flat for quite a while, and it was 30, and now it's 50. So,
Yeah. But the point is, we're not keeping up with what we're doing. So we just,
never will.
it was never designed to do that. So I think we're doing okay in that respect. There's a lot of stuff in here that we're going to get to. But on the expenditure side, we've got operating expenditures versus non-operating expenditures. And when I talk about operating expenditures, and we'll look at that in a minute, those remain fairly consistent from year to year over time. The things that change the most are the amounts you spend for capital items, whether it's trucks or buildings or equipment or whatever it is, and how we finance that. So a lot of times if things are financed with debt, you'll see your debt go up, your equipment load goes up. That's where the most variability is, and that's where the biggest area is to make changes. When we look at, with nearly every government entity, when you look at the operations of it, the major expenditure is health and benefits for the staff providing the services, whether it's people working in the sewer plant, driving the plow truck, or in City Hall, or in the parks. We don't have to worry about insurance contracts, union contracts. We've got another year left to go on that contract, so those rates are already set. I'll be doing another salary survey here in August to see how we stack up with our neighbors. What I'm seeing right now is, depending on when communities had their last salary adjustment, I'm seeing anywhere from rates from 0.5% to 5% and everywhere in between. So we need to have a good discussion on that and make sure that we're doing the right thing and compensating people fairly. We talked a little bit about capital expenditures. Projects are funded. this model with a combination of debt cash and special assessments. Now, the assumption is we have an assessment policy, and if we do a big sewer project or a big road project, we'll be following the policy. If we deviate from that, then we need to look to how we're going to pay for it. Project timing for certain projects, we all know those are yet to be determined. Bond issuances, we're sitting in a good position as far as legal debt margin, but again, as I mentioned earlier, any time we change our tax rate or issue a new bond, it's very sensitive to the taxpayer, because if we're assessing that to a property owner, they'll see it on their property taxes. And again, most of the questions I get on why did my taxes change, about 90% of them are due to valuation changes. Because what we try to do is we try to keep the rate stable, and we'll look at that in a minute.
May I comment on the salaries and benefits? Consumer price increase through July, I believe, is up 1% from a year ago.
Yep.
And I know there is some discussion in the community about whether our staff are too well compensated, or benefits or whatever are too good. So whatever you could present to us
Sure.
When the time comes, I think it's important to keep good people, and those are very hard things to replace. But I think we at least need to talk about it, make sure that we're doing well by our people and also well by our community.
Sure, and what I try to do is I pull a rather large set of data from our peer group, and I say, okay, what's the mean and the median, and where do we fall within those class ranges for similar type of responsibilities? You know, for example, if you find that somebody is really new to their position, they're probably going to be below the median. But if they've been in their position or their experience dictates that it would reflect a more experienced person, then if they're below that, then you say, well, why are they below that? Is there some other circumstance that makes them fall outside of what you would expect? So then you dig a little bit deeper and you try to figure out if where you're putting people is at the right spot. I mean, some people call it wage banding, or looking at what other communities are paying for similar services. And there's a whole lot of debate that goes into that. Why am I compared to this community and not that one? And what makes us different?
We had that in the Parks Department last year.
Yes, we did.
Yeah, so we had to give special consideration to that employee to work with them.
Yep.
And it was terrible where it was at.
Yeah, it was way on the bottom.
Yeah.
And if you remember the last union negotiations, we reset the wage scale on that because we had several of the job classes that had been negotiated were below minimum wage. So we readjusted everybody on that the last time we went around. Okay, so we'll talk about what do we want to do for debt and then maybe get a little direction. And I got a little bit of that up front. So when I look at the big picture, let's talk about tax rates for just a minute. We're moving over to page, I'm going to have trouble seeing my page numbers.
That's a 2.
Yep. Page 2.
Okay, so page 2, thank you. So this is a document from the county, and when we're all done with our property taxes and we have final rates, they provide us what our tax rate is. Now understand, you can also get all of this information out on the Department of Revenue's website. They have a software package called Prism, and you can go out there and take a look at it, and you can get any community in the state for comparison. So July 29th was the last reporting date for counties to submit their property tax values for 2020. And they do that 3 times a year. And then when they're finalized, then the state publishes that data, but you can see how it changes. So the things that change it are things like, I don't like how you valued my property and I'm contesting it, and now we need to make an adjustment. Or my property was misclassified and we need to make a change in the value. So all that stuff gets reconciled and it's reported at the state. So you'll see some minor differences and some high-level numbers, but the one thing that won't change is the amount that you levied. So if I look at the year that we're in, pay 20, our tax rate, which is the rate that gets applied to your taxable market value that determines how much tax you pay based on your home's value, was 30.684%. And if we go to the next page in that file, you can see how those final rates compare to our neighbors. And the thing that's most important on this one is when you look at you look at the net tax capacity rates over on the right-hand side, the things that change it are which school district that property resides in. So that's why you'll have multiple rates for the same community. It depends on the rate for wherever that school district is in. As you see, Cross Lake is at about 71%, about 80%, 76%, depending on which school district you're in.
Do we have a feel what the county has done to property values this year? I think last year they did an assessment of at least part of Cross Lake. It came through, and in some places we got hit. Just checking if we know what they were doing this year.
Every 5 years, they're supposed to adjust that. And what the county does is if they see, so let's say we have a property that was just assessed, a piece of raw land, and then 3 months later, somebody puts a large home on it. That information is shared with the county so that they don't get a lower value for 4 years until the next time the county comes around to assess it. So we try to catch all of those. I don't have specific information on what they did or how they applied that, but they send their assessors out as directed by the state. And so every 5 years you get adjusted, sometimes sooner. So.
I think that happened last year, at
Yeah.
least part of Cross Lake.
Yep, and it happens, they do sections. So the rest of that, like page 4, that's just some more information on how we compare with our neighbors. So on the left-hand side, you see the county general rates, which is specific to communities in the county, just for those communities. Right below that, you see the city rates. Now, every city has a different rate and a different reason why their rates are what they are, but it's primarily based on property tax value and how much they're levying to support their needs. So if I could get you for the moment to go to page 5 of this discussion, I'll make this bigger so everyone can see it. What I've got here is some history going over what our levy has been for the past, going back to 2016. And you can see how the change in the levy, where I'm showing here. And then what we try to do is, during the budget process, we try to understand why our levy is changing, whether it's change in operations up on the top or change in debt service. All of it impacts the change in each year. Some years you have bond issues that fall off. Some years you have new bond issues that come on, like right here. This is for the City Hall building, this 270,483. And this is the recommended levy for it for this year. I'll move this over so you can see the column here.
It looked like last year there was a huge increase in market value, which may have been one of the reasons we got hit. It was a 80 million and then 6.51%.
Yeah, yes. And what I'm trying to show here is when we look at estimated market value, I mean, these are estimates. So I'm looking at the change in dollars from the previous year. So we start out at 22 million, 35 million, 13, 35, and then boom, you can go up to 80. But you got to remember there were some pretty big buildings that came online in homes in this time frame, because there is a delay. And if you interpolate those numbers and try to come up with some kind of average increase per year, you're basically trying to take an educated guess at what do you think that valuation is going to be. And so if you go ahead and temper that a little bit and say, I know it's not going to be the average, it's going to be more or less than that average.
And down below, it looks like the change in tax capacity for this year is going to be a lot less than last year. If you go down for Asmore, I think.
Right here.
Difference between 7% and 3.76%. So yeah, a lot. It should be a lot more that part should be a lot more tolerable this year.
Yeah, and so the way I came up with this is we used to be able to get a report called the Spring Mini from the county. It'd basically give you, here's my best guess of what I think my adjustment in that rate's going to be. So what I'm looking at is this rate here. What's the percentage change in my taxable tax capacity? And the average of that is a little under 4%, 3.76%. So if I apply a factor of 2.5%, so it's not the smallest increase, but it's not the largest, it's more of a conservative estimate on the revenue side. With the levy that I'm showing in here of 4.5 million, that would give us a tax rate of 31.5% compared to all these years. So it's been within 1% or 2% of 30%. Some years it's been lower, some years it's been higher. Then what I try to do is I try to look at where are the dollars from that change coming from on that levy. So if I look at the change in the tax levy and the dollars, you know, in this calculation, $151,000 is coming from a change in tax capacity, and $81,000 is coming from an increase in the levy. So if you kept the rate the same, you would generate more money just based on an increased tax capacity.
So lots of that due to bigger value on properties or new properties that have been built or sales of properties or...
Yep.
Okay.
So the trick is to say, okay, if my property values are going up and my tax rate stays the same, then I can generate more money at the same rate.
Got it.
But if I take the theory that I need this much money to run my business, then I'm looking at how it impacts where it comes from. And the same is true if you drop this to like 22%, for example, you would see a large number, changes in tax levy are dropping it more than the change in the rate.
Got it.
So it's just kind of a gut check to try to understand where those dollars are coming from. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so we're going to look at this one now. And this is the
Page 6.
page 6. So what I do is I look at all the funds and all the departments and all the different things people have requested, including capital. And then I put it all together on one page and I say, okay, what do we need to do to pay for this stuff? Well, we've got taxes, our debt service levy, we've got sewer service charges, everything from the $305,000 up to here. I'll make that bigger so those on watching can see. We can adjust. We can't touch the debt levy. Probably don't want to touch tax increments. Those are already set. Sewer service charges, we can play with this number right here, the levy number, and we can play with these bottom two numbers right here, the 3.29 and the 900. You say, wow, what are those? What's driving those two numbers? Go down to the bottom right of that page. We're looking at how are we going to fund our capital projects. We have roads. This was from the first pass that I know is probably going to change from the Public Works. These are reconstructed roads or overlays or however you want to call it. We've got certificates. One is for to replace one of the heavy plow trucks, and the other was for a fire truck upgrade that we've been talking about for several years. you'd probably issue certificates to finance a fire truck or a plow truck, short-term certificates, say 5 years. Then the big one down here. Looking at how do we get rid of the solid waste items at the wastewater plant, that's about $1 million. And then we've just been rolling forward the sewer extension on 66 to the intersection of 66 and 16 from the old city hall. That's about 1.3 million. Those are things you would likely bond for to balance the budget.
So if we didn't do the sewer extension to basically up near 16, you could knock 1.3 off.
You'd knock 1.3 off the top and the bottom.
Just asking, okay.
Yep.
Just asking.
And you do the same with the roads. Then what I do is I look at, when I look at our capital item down here, that includes all the things that are in that capital plan, including the roads, equipment, all kinds of things like that. And then we have a deficit because we have depreciation in there of about $315,000. We know that we're carrying over about $100,000 of money to do Wildwind Ranch Road that we didn't do this year into next year's budget, and we get down to zero. So we're saying we may need to balance it with cash. That's kind of how I do it on the first pass. I try to figure out what we need to make things balance. And then we start chipping away at the items we need to refine our projects a little more. So questions up to this point?
Mike, could we at some point get a schedule of old bonds that are getting paid off, expiring or whatever? So
Yeah, we have that today.
do we, I mean,
Yep.
so we're getting rid of some, I'm sure, and
Yep.
replacing them with others, but it'd be I'd like to see a schedule of that
Sure.
at some point.
And that information is in the audit report too, in the footnotes in the audit report. And the ones that are being paid off in 2023 and then again in 2024 are the two nearest ones, and those relate to the sewer and then the public works building. The debt requirement on that is about $348,000 that would be coming off in 2023 and 2024. Okay? So, but I can get that to you. That's not a problem. So let's go right to the meat of it. If we look at, I'm just gonna, you can look at this on your own, but these next few pages are just high summary level of the revenues each year. And then where I like to spend a lot of time is on the next section. And that goes from about 8 to 12. This gives you some really good historical data on what our operating costs were, what our capital costs were, and what our debt costs were for each of those projects, for each of those years. And when you look at that, look at how the capital and debt kind of go hand in hand with each other. So if you're spending a lot of money on capital and you're using debt to finance it, then that next year your debt payment's going to go up. But I think what everyone wants to spend the most time on here is further back in the file. And just the way this is laid out, the further you get into the file, the more detail there is. So when you look at that, so let's go back, all the way back to when we start talking about capital. And that's going to get us to, starting on page 13. I left a lot of the old descriptions in here so we can understand where we spent the current budget money for 2020. This column over here that says 2021, this is what we're looking at for next year. You know, most of the departments are relatively small. You know, you're replacing computers or buying equipment and stuff like that. When you get to general government, this is where we've been tracking. I believe I'm still on page 13. Yeah. So when I look at here, you know, this is what we've budgeted for the new city hall. So when I talked about challenges, this is one of the things we're going to need to decide what we're doing at some point with the remodel of the fire hall, and then we'll need to adjust the budget accordingly. I know we're not going to solve that today, but that's just kind of a heads up on where we need to go with that. Okay, so those numbers will change. When we look at police, we got notified, I believe Chief Lee just got notified that the squad cars that were ordered back in January or November, December of 2019, they just started to build them like this week. So we might yet see those this year, which would be a good thing because we've been waiting for them. So those are the numbers we're looking at for that. When we look at fire administration, Chip, if you want to comment on this item here, the 650,000, that might be helpful. Just explain what that is.
We've had in the budget a capital outlay. We've talked about replacing engine 2 and replacing with a new engine. I also have it in 2025. There was been discussion on the ladder truck. You know that I'm not in favor of it, but I know ISO has been talking to us about with the buildings that are continuously being built here in our town. The large storage buildings are our target hazard for our community, and so basically, if I'm going to ask if we could consider bumping that 650 to 879 for a demo E1 ladder truck, but it's an engine/ladder. It's a 78-foot ladder truck. But then we would be able to take off that 2025 600,000 the capital outlay. A ladder engine would be a 30-year truck. Ideal Corners has a ladder right now. It's about 16 or 17 years old, and they don't plan on replacing it.
Okay.
My engine 2, basically it's going to replace engine 2, which is a 1997 engine.
You're getting good length?
Excuse me?
Lots of time out of it.
Oh yeah, we bought it 15 years ago, used from Pennsylvania
Yeah.
for a backup engine now.
Okay.
So we can talk about that more down the road.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
I have a question, silly. Is there anybody selling a ladder truck that would be cheaper, that would be efficient for us?
I've been looking around and talked to a few of the used business where we've purchased from before for used, and it's really hard to find a good used 78-foot single axle truck.
Gotcha.
So we don't want a tandem because we wouldn't be able to get it anywhere. So it's a short truck. The one that we actually looked at, the reason it's a demo at 879 is just because they're going to use it to show for like a month, but usually that truck is 1.1 million. So it's kind of a good deal on that, but the ladder we looked at is the same length as our engine 1. So it's not any longer, it's not any taller, but now you have ladder and rescue capabilities, and it helps with the ISO, like I said.
Thank you.
When I look at the rest of the fire department, we're fairly consistent between years. We're buying turnout gear, PPE, just a whole host of things, hoses, medical supplies. So the truck is the big thing that bumps the budget up. So we'll have more discussion on that later. When we look at public works, what's happened with the county, go ahead, why don't you go talk about the county, Ted? We share costs with the county. And when we do that, sometimes the county runs the project and sometimes we run it and charge each other for our share of it. Now, what the county's done is they basically said, we're not going to do the things we planned because we've got other things to do. So go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, we met with them, as a matter of fact, yesterday. And since the COVID, they've basically froze all their monies right now. For this year, there was planned, they had about, I think it was about 70,000 that they were planning this year to put into capital into the facility down there. We had 182 that we'd marked for this year. As of the meeting yesterday, there was $13,000 is all they have left to commit to this year. Everything else has been tied up or locked up. we took and we reevaluated the list of things that are here and something that we should get done before the first of the year. And with their 13,000 and 13 or 15,000 from us, we believe we could get those couple things done to make the facility keep going the way it is. One of the major ones is the garage door and the garage door opener on it. It's original to the facility, and it goes up and down continuously all day long. So that was one of the things that we earmarked. The other thing is we have a leak in the roof. We are not sure where it's coming from. When it rains, we don't actually get water. We got a tar-like substance that's dripping inside of the facility. Thielens is coming to remove some panels off the roof and try to identify what it is. Whether it is the exhaust accumulating up in the roof system and dripping down, or the insulation board that's up there is deteriorating, we're not sure. So they're just doing some investigation. As far as next year, they're not committing anything to capital for the 2021. I guess we were going to put about 50,000 into the repair and to future of our salt and sand building down there. If everybody remembers, the salt and sand building in one of the storms a couple years ago leaned one way. Well, we took and reloaded all the salt and sand to one side of the pole building, kind of brought the building back to where it's supposed to be, and now we're very careful how we load the building so we aren't putting any undue stress on that side of the building. But the engineers actually came up with a solution to fix that, and that's what the 58 or 100,000 was for. I guess out of that of Public Works, so we're looking at 182 if we do another 12 or 13,000 out of there, 15,000, whatever it amounts to be. And I guess what I would like to see is we carry the money over, and the 100,000 that we're earmarking for next year would just be basically eliminated in the 2021 budget and just carry over what we have left from this year into the following year, just so we've got monies for the future. So I got you 100,000 there, hopefully.
Thank you.
This is the last time we're gonna visit this, right?
I hope so.
Oh.
Well, we can talk about it as much as you want. What do you want to ask me?
I just wanna digest it a little bit.
Okay, and we can bring it up again.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go into the vehicle stuff then, Mike, or?
Yeah, go ahead and talk about the truck. I remember,
In our operating budget for this year, we've got 168,000 left, and then there was about 300,000 in next year's budget. One of the major things was to replace one of our dump trucks or add another dump truck to our fleet, which is a plow truck. We have a 2013, a 2007. They don't have a lot of miles on them, but remember, they're pushing pretty hard in that snow. And things start to break when they start to get that 15 to 17 years old. The county, the state, they're all trying to get about that time trying to move them on or sell them. And so that's what I guess what our big thing is in next year's budget would be the truck. We're still trying to this year to purchase the pickup and replace our water truck. Mm-hmm. So we're going to try to work down the 168 that we've got left in this year's budget yet. So.
now remember, we reallocated the one truck to finish paying for Perkins Road too.
Yes.
So that's going to have to be rebudgeted for next year.
I'd just say we're really blessed with the plow service that happens in Cross Lake. It's been incredible. So thank you.
Do you want to touch on roads a little bit? Now, some of these, I changed some of the labels to like 2021, and there may be a placeholder in 2020 for a project we didn't do. But what we tried to do is say, okay, we know we're going to do so much for each type of project, and this is where the $997,000 came from. We talked about early on was road projects. So we've got 40,000 for crack sealing, 18,000 for chip sealing next year, and this 419,000 is what was presented at the Public Works Commission, which is comparable to the 331 we had budgeted for this year that we didn't do. Mm-hmm. We were planning on using a bond to finance that along with the road going out to the rock dam. which we didn't do. So when I look at all of the, here's reconstruction projects. These are ones you would likely issue bonds for and assess under your current policy. And Ted, if you want to talk, that's the big number, so why don't you talk about some of those roads for a minute?
Well, we've Rushmore, Harbor Lane, Brook Circle, Arrowhead Lane. We've had a 5-year capital plan for a number of years. And all of these numbers that you're seeing are not new. They're just, some of the things have been kicked down the road. And their numbers are starting to get bigger and bigger because we've kicked them down the road so far. And we either have to do it or adjust our plan. We have in the past, the city took and reconstructed, and we typically didn't do overlays, and we didn't do chip seals. We've started doing overlays and chip seals now, trying to change the program, but we've still got some major reconstructs out there to do.
Is that what we talked about in the Public Works meeting?
Dave and I, Dave and I are actually adjusting.
What I remember from that meeting is that we had $1 million for the projects, and we could do overlays instead of reconstructs, and drop that price down to about 300 grand, and we would get 20 years or so out of the roads.
Well, and we're going to try to overlay what we could. Dave and I have not finished going through everything we talked at Public Works, but we haven't got there yet. We're getting closer to it. But right now, we just presented what was in this year, this year's 5-year capital plan. But we are working on trying to fine tune the numbers and come up with a different number for you. I just need to know, do you want me to overlays and reconstruction, everything at $1 million? Do you want 800,000? Give me a number to work to.
300 overlays.
Well, that's overlays, but you're still going to have a bunch of reconstructs and you're going to kick down the road.
Well, okay, but we don't have to do this right now, but I would like to do that.
Okay.
And
Well,
maybe I should ride with you and Dave. And go
Yep, that would be a good thing to do. Get in the truck and come with us and let's talk about it.
I'd like to do that with the equipment stuff, don't I? I'd like to take a little tour with you.
Okay.
Just,
Yep, you're more than welcome. Anytime, any of you are welcome to come down and see it and we walk through it, so. The other thing that's actually in this year's capital budget is that we're looking for a patch wagon to hold the patch to keep it warm. That's the problem. We go get a load of patch and by the time we get back here, it's already cold. So we're looking for one of the patch wagons that heats it and keeps it warm so we can fill holes more efficiently and effectively. We end up throwing half the truckload away because it's cold by the time it gets here, so.
Yeah, cold patch is a lot. I mean,
Don't
I know
work,
that
don't stick.
It's all different than the hot, warm stuff, so.
but Ted, as we're going into budgeting here, I would really like to do those field trips with you. Because I can either go against you or go for you, and if I really have a good view of what's going on, it will sure help me to go on either side of it.
More than welcome at any time, any of you to come with me. We can make a field trip if you want.
Yeah, okay, good.
When do you need an answer from us, Ted?
Well, but, you can set the budget now at this high number and you can reduce it, like Mike says, anytime after that too.
We don't have to do anything today, though.
No, you don't have to do anything today. The purpose of today is to give you a high-level look at the issues that we're trying to solve, and then get some input and direction on which way we want to go. And I think we're getting some of that as we have these discussions. So,
It's just a flyover,
yeah.
Yeah, we're just trying to get a feel what you guys want us to do. We'll bring it back to at that point, so, or as close as we can.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to try to get us back on target here so we can have a break before our next meeting. So as you look through this, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that you'll have questions on. Or you might not have questions. You might have questions on things like, when I look at page, whatever page this is, page 19, why we've got $50,000 in the cemetery. At some point, we're going to need to do something with irrigation and replatting the rest of the sites out there, because we're starting to get low on graves. We had a interesting year last year with that. So we'll need to address that at some point. You can delay it at some.
Yeah, that was one of the questions from the commission was, do we need to replot?
So that was 50, yeah, right. Okay, that's
After-
not irrigation, that's replotting.
Replotting, with having to come out the new part of the cemetery to replot and set it up, have the surveyors go out and put basically property pins in all the corners. Well, after checking with the clerk, she sold a lot of lots last year, and the inventory is getting lower. So we are getting to the point where we're gonna have to do it in the very near future.
So how many did you sell last year approximately, Shar, and how many are left?
I didn't check.
Okay, that's, I mean, that'd be something to look at.
Yeah.
I don't have one.
I'd like to see that too. I mean, it'd just give you a good comparison.
So there'll be more to come on that. You know, we get to page 20 and we look at the parks, you know, you'll have a question on there saying, what are we paying $10,000 for a gas line for? The idea here is to get rid of the propane tanks. So we have a constant, stable supply of gas for some of the outbuildings. Preliminary
Didn't we do
numbers.
something there last year, gas line, to that back garage?
That was approved, put it in the budget.
Yeah.
And is it the same thing you're talking about? This is the same thing you're talking about?
Correct, yes.
Okay, all right.
Yep. So the long-term plan is to get rid of the propane tanks, go to natural gas. Some of the other things we're looking at is, you know, because we've got some things in the CARES Act, you know, some of these capital items could fit into that description. We can pull them forward and then take them out of the budget. One would be a vehicle for the parks. So they have two vehicles, they don't ride together, and they can stay apart. Right now, they share a vehicle. So we're looking at that. The other thing when you look at the parks is right now you know, the pickleball courts are done. They look fantastic. The tennis courts have been resurfaced. So all that's working out well. We're just looking at, I know PAL has a meeting coming up and they'll be addressing forwarding along the donations that they've held for us for that project. So that kind of gets us to about 5 minutes or so past where we want it to be before we broke. But when you look at this, there's all kinds of descriptions in here that we've carried over from prior years so you can see, in current years, so you can kind of see what we've done. The match shows up with the projects. So from this point, I don't have anything else to say other than I want your input. I want to be challenged on this. And we need to really look at this and have a good discussion the next time we meet, which will be 2 weeks from today.
I just looked at the revenue here.
Okay?
Last year we sold 65 cemetery lots. And that's a lot for 1 year.
It is, do you know how many are left?
I have,
Okay.
not a lot of them.
Yeah, there's not a lot in the old cemetery.
I mean, a lot is a relative term.
Yeah.
Are there 150? I mean, that's kind of whatever.
Yeah, I mean, we're not gonna run out.
Yeah. Okay, the only thing I would say is that this is a stressful year for everybody in town, and if there's something like that or something that we can kick down the road, I think we should do it. So, I'm not gonna get specific at all on that, but in general, the county's, you know, putting the clamp on people, businesses in town, or everybody's struggling, so. I don't think this is the year to do extra things, especially with all our projects and all the stuff we got, so.
Sure, so I think everyone knows where to find me. So get me your comments, your questions. I'd be happy to sit down with any of you across the table and talk about it. Go ahead, Chip.
And probably here in the next couple of weeks, I will send you information on the CARES Act and some of the options that we may have to use those funds. And it'll show, like Mike said, that we can actually, some of the things that we could purchase would be coming off capital outlay down the road, which will follow the guidelines of the CARES Act, so that'll be a discussion as well.
Good, good. Sure.
I guess I'm speaking as a Public Works Commission member. Just looking at the calendar, just looking at the calendar, the Public Works doesn't meet until the 7th, which is Labor Day, so it's the 8th, Tuesday, and you guys have to certify your levy by the 15th, so if you want the Public Works to provide some information on priorities on these projects, I don't know if Public Works needs to have a special meeting or the council needs to give Public Works okay, this is kind of the top dollar, and you guys work into, what can you do, we'll give you a figure. I'm just saying, the way the calendar's working, you know, there's nothing going on for the next 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden, we're gonna have a public works meeting, and that's bucking right up against your
Well, so
council
Ted,
meeting
you
when you have
wanna-
to certify.
Do you want to kind of look into that and see if possibly want to pull together?
I had taken and was talking to Dave where we're at with this. And so I'm getting close to where we could have another meeting and sit down and talk and break it out a little more.
Okay.
I just needed a number to go with what you want us to work towards.
And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to question what, you know, and whatever I'm going to do that, so, and I'm just giving you notice that, let's try to.
I'd like to have a meeting with you beforehand so you can see
Absolutely.
what we're talking about.
Anytime. Okay,
Okay, I don't have anything further.
let's adjourn this for 5 minutes before the next one, huh?
I have a question for Ted and Dave.
Yep, go ahead.
Concerning roads, is it possible, and I understand the need to look at overlays and chip sealing and all that. And I personally, I have looked at some of them, and I have felt that some of them maybe could get us by 1 or 2 more years. So the question that I have is, and I don't want to question the methodology to fix them necessarily, if overlays work, fine, but is it possible that you could look at, you know, right now we're looking at 2021. There are no, you haven't earmarked any numbers for 22 or 23. Is it possible you could take those roads or look out a ways and see what's coming behind them and see if we can come up with a number that's relatively steady from year to year for road work?
Mr. Schrupp, that was the goal way back when Mike asked the council a year ago, what do you want to set a number? Do you want to do 500,000, 700,000, $1 million? And we didn't get much direction at that time. So we have a 5-year plan that already, all of those roads are already spelled out in that 5-year plan. I know you guys probably don't have a copy of this, but I can get you a copy of this. But those numbers are actually here in this 5-year plan.
That would be great if you could send that out so everybody could see, because they're, you know, right now what we're looking at, and I know this is a preliminary, but it looks like we don't have any work to do for 22, 3, 4, 5, or beyond. So that
No,
would help.
there's stuff scheduled every year. So we'll get you a copy of this.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay. About a 2-minute break. Second?
Sure.
All in favor?
Hi.
Thanks.